Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another weekly video. Thank you ever so much for joining me. And this week I'm going to be processing a couple of images. The first photograph is one that I posted on Instagram a little while ago, and for whatever reason people really loved it. It really resonated with them. But I wanted to come straight on a couple of things of some of the manipulation that I added to that photograph, because at the time I didn't feel quite right, because people said, oh, amazing light. Well, in fact, the light wasn't that amazing. It's just that I've added that light. So I just wanted to show you quickly how I went about that. The other photograph I'm going to be working on is one that I took in the Lake District when I was hanging out with Henry Turner and Paul Thompson. We were on this little kind of plateau overlooking some beautiful mountains. The problem with small areas is that usually other people or other photographers get in your way. So I wanted to kind of combat that in Photoshop and show you how I would get around that. So without further delay, let's get stuck right into these two photographs. This is the raw file. This is the final file. And you can see it's quite a departure from the raw file. So I did take some artistic license here, and I just wanted to be upfront about that because, you know, a lot of people were saying, oh, fantastic light. And I kind of feel a bit kind of not wrong, but a bit weird about the whole thing, because really I've just added that light. So the reason why I do some of this processing is to mitigate some of the things that bug me in raw files. And when I did take this photograph, I did know that there was some white sky up here, and I purposely left it in with the intent of trying to mitigate it somewhat by feathering out the light and spreading it out more. So when it comes to the frost and the backlit frosty branches here, that was legitimate. All I've done in the final image here is just brighten those areas up. But this section here, what I find is that rather than just having white to very dark, I like to just spread that light out. And you can do it as much or as little as you want. So in this case, it was very, very simple. All I did was just use a radial tool. So if we just go over to the filters here, use the radial gradient, and we'll just reduce the size of this photograph here. So I've taken the radial gradient to out here. You can make it as small or as big as you want. I've really feathered it, and all I did was use the dehaze slider down here. So I just started to bring the dehaze up to the point where it was more or less getting to the point where it was the same tonality as the white sky. Now, as you can see, I've gone to the maximum, and you can still see that whole jarring area. So what you have to do in that case is play around with the exposure and the whites and the highlights. So in this case, I think I upped the exposure, and you can see it's getting brighter and brighter, and also the highlights. Keep going with the whites, something like that. Now, you can see that this is really overexposed, so I've obviously bring up the highlights too much. So we can just reduce the highlights, possibly the whites, something like that there. And that's all I did. As I said, the rest of the work I played around with in Photoshop. The colors, obviously the blue has been enhanced in the final image, and that's really just by adding contrast and bringing up those whites and highlights. This image here is actually a little bit underexposed. If we look at the histogram here up in the corner here, you can see there's an awful lot of shadows in here. So I exposed for the brightest spot in the image, which happens to be the frost at the bottom here. So what I ended up doing with this final photograph here is, or if we just go back to the raw file here, because this area is so much brighter than the top area, I used a linear gradient and basically really spread that out. And again, I adjusted the exposure and the highlights. I brought them down, and the whites. So it was more in line with the top of the image. And then I would brighten everything up so that in the final image here, the brightest area is obviously up in the corner here, but this grass is not competing with the backlit oak branches, if that makes sense. So here's the raw file and the final image. Now this photograph here, this is something that it was an almost, whoops. I was looking for compositions and I found this beautiful rock and it was getting some great light on it, but you can see my immediate problem. We have other people in the way. Now this area is quite small, so, and I didn't want to ask Henry to get out the way because he's there doing his own thing. And of course, Paul was there as well. So our packs are in the way and Henry's in the way. So what I did was I took a number of different exposures where Henry and Paul are kind of moving around. And what I decided to do is see if I could get rid of them by just layering these images in Photoshop. Now, obviously, there are some areas that I'm not going to be able to paint out, like the pack here. And I think, let's see, does Henry move his pack? He does move it a little bit. So there were some areas that I had to use some Photoshop trickery. So what I'm going to do, I have worked on these a little bit. I didn't do an awful lot to them, just added, let's see here, added some, just up the shadows, brought up the whites a little bit, and that's pretty much all I did. So let's select all of these images. I'm going to right click on them and edit in Open as Layers in Photoshop. All right, we've opened up the images in Photoshop as layers. And what I want to do first is just make sure I select all of those layers. And we're just going to go up to Edit and Auto Align the Layers. And the reason why we do that is we just want to make sure that even though we took the images at the same time, that they're all lined up, because there could be a shift in your camera or whatever. So we'll just do that really quickly. Now, the first thing you need to do is we have our base layer, which is this one here. And then we have the next layer and then the next layer here. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of Henry. So what we can do is we just look at this carefully here. We also need to get rid of Paul. So we're just going to put a mask on a black mask. Remember, black conceals and white reveals. So to do that, we can just go down to the mask tool here, or the mask icon, and press the Option key, and that will create a black mask. And then the next layer, we do the same for the next layer as well. So there we go. We have just the one bottom image revealed right now. Go back up to the top one. Make sure we're on white paint. We have a paintbrush that's 100% flow and opacity. And we just want to make sure that that is feathered. We'll bring it down quite small. And what we're going to do is we're going to slowly paint over Henry here. And you'll notice that he is magically disappearing. Like so. Now we'll just bring this, let's just zoom in a bit closer here. The pink is just my, the little marker here. Every time I press the Option key, it draws on the screen. Right, go back to brush. We'll just go a little bit smaller here. And we just keep painting over Henry. Henry's a great guy, but I just don't want him in my photograph. So cheerio, Henry. Make sure we get rid of his tripod. He just has his leg left. And there we go. We've got rid of Henry. Now, unfortunately, I don't think we can get rid of the backpack. Let's try this. Oh, we could get rid of a little bit. Let's let's see how far. See, now we're starting to reveal the next layer under. It's actually probably better than what we had. You'll notice if I keep going, then we get Henry's leg here. He's moving in the frame there. So if you want to reverse that, just press the X key. So now you've got black, and we just paint back over that like so. So we'll leave his tripod in. We'll have to, and part of his pack, we'll have to get rid of those with probably some kind of wizardry in Photoshop. All right. Now, I'm not sure. Let's have a look here. There's Paul. So we don't need to get rid of Paul. And all the backpacks are still there. Okay, I think all we're going to be able to get rid of is Henry. The rest of the stuff here, this backpack is actually mine. I probably could have moved that, and I probably could have asked the guys just to move their packs over, but this is more of just for demonstration purposes. And really, it's just to demonstrate that if you are in an area where there are a lot of people around and you're having trouble taking a photograph with those people in there, if you just take multiple images when the people have kind of moved around a little bit, you should be able to get rid of them by just cloning them out or by using layers like this. However, in this case, I'm going to have to use the Photoshop Magic to get rid of some of these items. So this one here, I'm just going to draw around with the lasso tool, and I'm going to use generative fill. Now you do need an internet connection for this, so let's just see how well this actually does. In the box there, I wouldn't type anything, just push the generate tool. This might take a little while because these are medium format files. There's 3 of them. It's 1.8 gigs, so it might take a little while to actually come up with something. But let's see what happens here. Oh, well, there we go. Does a pretty bang up job, actually. There's actually 3 versions. That one looks really good. That one, not so much. This one looks great. All right, I'm going to keep that version there. And then this area here is really large. Let's just see how well this does for these packs and tripod and so on. Now, of course, it would have been way easier and probably more ethical to just move this stuff. But in a pinch, I guess, tools like this do come in really handy. It's quite remarkable, actually. Well, and there we go. Again, it's done a bang up job. Let's see. That one looks really good. That's probably the best one there, that third one. So let's just zoom out here. Whoops. And as you can see, it's done a really awesome job of getting rid of Henry and Paul and all of our stuff. Now, in terms of composition, I quite like the light on this rock, but I really wish that I could have moved over to the right somewhat, but I was standing on a bit of a bluff, so I couldn't really move over. It would have been nice to have put this over here. In terms of processing this, all it really needs is just a little bit of contrast. So what I would do in this case is just grab a curves layer and perhaps just drag the shadows down just a tad and bring up the highlighted areas like so, something like that. In Lightroom, I do find it much easier to deal with sky. I use the sky filter quite often because you are able to feather it with a gradient filter as well, so the transition is quite gradual. You can do that in Photoshop, but I just find Lightroom more intuitive and easier to deal with. You may have noticed also, since I've added contrast, that the blues are starting to get quite out of hand in the background here, so I would also tone those down. If I really wanted to bring more emphasis to this sunlit rock, I would probably use something like Lumenzia or TK7, the masks so that I could actually just brighten those areas without affecting the rest of the image. So in this case, we can grab a lights mask, and you can see that the bright areas here are what will be affected when I use that brush. The darker areas, not so much. So if I select that, this is the mask, Control or Command H to hide those marching ants. I'm just going to grab a dodge tool here and bring it down to perhaps 4%. We can try 3. Make sure the brush is nicely feathered, and I just slowly paint over that area. And it might be hard to notice, but that is brightening up quite considerably. So if we go to the layers here and click on that mask, you can see that we've brightened up that little spot there. So if you want to bring attention to an area, like a bright area, then this is a great way to do it without affecting the rest of the photograph. Well, thank you ever so much for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it helps you along with your processing. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to give me the old thumbs up. That's always appreciated. And don't forget to go and check out my new book, Land and Light, on my website. Thank you ever so much, guys, for the support. I really appreciate it. And until next time, bye-bye.